We're live. Hello. I'm going to go ahead and get started since this is virtual and recorded, and you can access it at any time. So I want to thank my hosts, my co-hosts here. I have Maggie Bates with A1, or not A1, with Adaptations Studios. I have Patrick Martin with A1 Builders, and I have Dylan Langei from Umpqua Bank. So we're here at Bellingham to talk to you about building an ADU here in Bellingham. And first off, I want to just say thanks for joining us. And then also, I want to recognize that we are all grappling with a pandemic, and that looks differently for a lot of us. And there's also bits and pieces of this pandemic that look very similar. And I wanted to address that. I went back and forth between continuing to on the path of presenting this information at a time, well, due to its financial nature, and at a time where that might be a really sensitive subject for a lot of people. But I wanted to present this from the perspective of looking forward into the future and how we might be able to use ADUs to rebuild locally as we come out of a recession that has been triggered by this pandemic, and how we can come together and hire locally and put money back into our economy while also investing in real estate, which is just one of the most resilient places to put your money. So again, I just wanted to address that I'm incredibly sensitive to the financial nature of this, and it is not my intention to promote building an ADU right now, but again, as a future investment and a future thought to consider. So first off, I'm just going to go over the goals of hosting these workshops. So first of all, it's a goal of mine to host these workshops quarterly, with the first one coming now, and then this summer, and then again in fall. So I wanted to kind of continue on with that, with my goals there, so that I don't miss the opportunity to connect you with the local resources that exist here in Bellingham, and to just continue to build knowledge and awareness around ADUs. And then to bring together all of the local ADUs professionals in Bellingham, so that you can start identifying your team of people, because the team of people that you're going to be working with to take on your project is so essential. The experience and the knowledge that these folks bring to this industry is incredible, and how we can support each other and they can support you to be to take on this project is just really important, and to taking, yeah. And also to offer a guide to understanding the process and the steps that are required to build an ADU, and help just make the project more accessible and hopefully ease the burden a little bit. And then to another goal, the last goal, is to answer questions about a specific project that you have in mind. So who you'll meet here. So you'll meet me. I'm Kelcy. I am a real estate agent with Hoppis Real Estate, and I'm here to connect you with Dylan Langei from Umpqua Bank, and then Maggie Bates with Adaptations, and then Patrick from A1. So just a little background on me. I was born and raised in Colorado, Fort Collins, Colorado, and then I moved to Portland right after college, where I spent 11 years, and then just most recently moved to Bellingham in October. So I'm really excited actually to be here in Bellingham experiencing this pandemic, because it's giving me a really interesting insight into your community and now my community, and how everyone is coming together to support one another. And it's been a really beautiful example of how you guys have what you're offering each other and how you're connecting. So yeah, I'm really thankful to be here. And I put in here that just my background, my career background, I put in social services to give you an understanding of where I'm coming from before real estate, and how social services has given me a really lovely perspective into resilience and how people adapt in the face of adversity. And I think that those skills that come from social services really do me a service in real estate, and how I support people through the process of transacting real estate, and supporting you through the process of selling real estate, or adding value to your property through things such as remodeling and ADUs, and the stresses that come with those sort of things. So I want to go over why I believe in ADUs and the opportunities that they hold. And the first one, something that I learned a lot about moving from Colorado to Portland, was density. So I was leaving Colorado at a time where it was really, really beginning to sprawl in a way that felt intense, and not necessarily aligned with kind of the ethos of Colorado and activity and climate disruption. And it was really lovely to land in Portland to experience the walkability and the bikeability and density, and how density really offers the opportunity for sustainability and community, which are my next two bullet points, and why I believe in ADUs and the opportunities there. And then flexibility. So an ADU, once it's built and permitted and legal, it's a super flexible dwelling. So it can be a long-term rental, it can be housing for kids or parents, it can be a workspace, it can be a short-term rental, and it could possibly even be eventually, especially in something like this, an isolation place for people who are looking to heal. So I think that there's just so many ways an ADU can be used to create resilience on your property. And then just design. I'm super obsessed with design of small spaces, and I think ADUs offer such incredible ways to play with space in a way that contributes to sustainability, and it just addresses a lack of missing middle housing, where non-traditional family can live in a way that we're not building houses right now. So a little bit of more background of me. So I moved to Portland in 2008, just the tip of the recession. And the 11 years that I lived there, the ADU movement just became more and more prevalent. And I witnessed that as the real estate market dropped and dropped and dropped, the ADU permit applications and buildings started to go up and up and up, which was a testament to how resilient this kind of development is, and how important and missing this kind of development is. So I really kind of started to dig my fingers into the ADU movement there during that time. And then I spent the last 2 years in Portland as a leasing agent, and spent a lot of time leasing various kinds of residential property, and specifically ADUs that I leased for homeowners. And so that gave me a really interesting insight in design, first off, and then also how an ADU really performs in the real estate market, in the rental market. And then over 50% of my buyer clients in Portland, while they were searching for properties to buy, they were searching for properties that specifically allowed them to add living space, whether that just be a detached bedroom or an extra bedroom, another whole living unit, or space for a detached space for their parents or kids. So I have a lot of experience in the transactional piece of looking at property specifically to add living space. And then I'm an accredited Earth Advantage broker. So Earth Advantage is a nonprofit based in Portland that educates people in the building and real estate industry in moving that industry towards more sustainable practices. So Earth Advantage and Cole Peterson, my mentor, collaborate to put on a class called All About ADUs. That's an 8-hour class all day that finishes with a test that then certifies brokers as ADU specialists. So, and then in order to maintain that accreditation, I participate in continuing education throughout the year and then retake a test every year so that I stay up to date with those practices and the legislation that's in place. And then just lastly, as far as background, my mentorship with Cole Peterson. So Cole Peterson is a very prominent advocate for the ADU movement. He has built many ADUs on his own properties, and then he also consults with homeowners to build their ADUs on their properties, and is an advocate at both the city and the state level in Oregon and California. He did write this fantastic book that I highly suggest called Backdoor Revolution. It's the only book ever written about how to develop an ADU, and it goes into great detail. So I've worked with him personally for the last few months and have learned so much and have him at my fingertips as well for any questions that homeowners have. And then just as this is where I'm coming from, where my experience lies as far as ADUs go, and this is how I can be a resource to you. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-hosts here and let them introduce themselves. So the first is Dylan Langei. He's from Umpqua Bank, and I just want to also give a shout out to Umpqua Bank for being really proactive and prominent in the in bringing lending products to the ADU space. So go ahead, Dylan.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. So yeah, I work over at Umpqua Bank. I have a team of 23. We have 13 loan officers, and we're all construction certified. Doing new construction to renovation loans, which I will touch on later here. But yeah, I mean, I personally have a detached ADU. It's a great resource for supplemental income. If you have friends or family staying, I love it. I love the aesthetics as well. And yeah, am I jumping into my section here, Kelsey?
Oh, nope. I'm introducing and
Perfect.
We'll come back. Yep. Thanks, Dylan.
Yep.
All right. And then next up, I'm going to let Maggie introduce herself and her knowledge and experience with ADUs.
Hi, thank you, Kelsey, for inviting me to co-host with this. I've been designing at Adaptations Design Studio, which is also A1 Builders, for about 14 years. And recently the ADU surge has taken hold. And so I've had quite a few people come to us looking for help developing ADUs. And we've gotten a few of them successfully permitted and built and gone all the way through. And so it's a dense process, but it's usually a really satisfying thing to do with your property. So I manage the design department at Adaptations Design Studio A1 Builders, and we've got 4 designers on board, and we basically take people from the very beginning stage of design, where you've got like a wish list and you don't even know what your budget is yet. So we start there, and then we take you all the way through all the design phases and all the permitting phases, and get you ready for construction. So that's our job.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you for being here. And then Patrick.
Hi there. Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, so Maggie and I work together. We've worked together for a long time. My current job is as a general manager of our co-op. So we're also a worker-owned cooperative with 7 members and 18 employees. We have 8 full-time carpenters in the staff and 8 full-time carpenters in the field building stuff. And then there's another 5 or so of us that are kind of supporting the design and the construction side of things. So my job really is to talk to anyone who's coming to A1 for help and try to help them figure out if we're a good match for them, if our services lend themselves to what it is they're trying to do. And one of the initial questions for a lot of people is really who to choose to work with. And so our company is a little different in that we house sort of all of the facets of pre-design, design, estimating, proposal, construction agreements, and construction of the project. So anyone who steps on board with us kind of gets the full package, and that doesn't always work for everyone. There's also a lot of great general contractors and designers in this community that work together. And so part of my initial conversation is trying to get people aligned with their budget, trying to have an understanding of what it is they're trying to do, and then try to figure out, you know, if we're a good match for them. I'm particularly interested in ADUs for a couple of reasons that you already mentioned. There's something unique and unusual in trying to design sort of all of the elements of a comfortable living space and an efficient living space in a really small footprint. That's a particular design challenge that I think most of the people that work with us enjoy. And it's really unique and different for every building, whether that's a building we're trying to reconfigure or whether that's a new structure. And I think the other thing that's really intriguing to me is that in a community that's densifying at such a rapid rate that Bellingham is, and the surrounding municipalities in our county, that I'm not sure how long we can really afford to build multi-thousand square foot housing developments, and how long those are really going to meet the needs of, you know, people on a broad spectrum economically in our community. So being in a place to help facilitate that is exciting for us as a team and me personally. So, thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, so from here, the layout is going to be, I'm going to go over local Bellingham code and regulations. And I just want to, yes, I'm going to go with that first. And then once I have gone through that, we're going to kind of go over costs. And then I'm going to hand it off to my co-hosts. Dylan's going to go over lending, and then Maggie and Patrick are going to go over building. And then because we're Facebook Live and it's there's a bit of a lag, it's going to be best for us to answer all of the questions at the end. So we're just going to pump through this, and then I'm going to switch over to Facebook Live and check out all of the questions that you might have. So as we're speaking, if you want to type in your question, and then we'll address all the questions at the end based on whoever fits that best. So just a quick disclaimer that all of the information that I have in here is specifically Bellingham Municipal Code. So it's not Whatcom County and it's not other jurisdictions. Maggie and Patrick can speak more to those codes. I'm more digging my fingers into a Bellingham specific, the city of Bellingham specifically. And then again, what is being presented is a general scope of where to begin with planning your ADU project. It's not comprehensive by any means, and every property is going to be different and require so many different steps and intricacies, because every property is going to be different, differently located, and depending on your jurisdiction and your location, there's going to be all the nuances to address. So that's just a disclaimer that this presentation is not all of the answers. It's just the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg. So an ADU, just for the basics, an ADU is a fully separate living unit that is on the same lot or within the primary unit on the lot. And it has all of the basic facilities needed for daily living. So a bathroom, a kitchen, and a sleeping area. And the things that really separate those from the ADU from, let's say, an extra habitable space, recreation space, or just a studio is the fact that it has all of those pieces along with the presence of a stove and a 220 volt outlet for that stove. There's also the nuance of a number of plumbing features, depending on if you're looking into building an extra habitable space per se, but the plumbing features kind of exceed what that habitable space is able to hold, then that might trigger a land use permit into the ADU space. All right, and then this is just the city of Bellingham's explanation of their legislation. I was going to read it to you, but all of the faces are in the way. I'm going to do that. Okay, so I'm going to read it to you just because I think it really lays out well why folks have worked so hard behind the scenes to get this legislation in place. So the city of Bellingham, this legislation, the purpose of this legislation is to implement policy provisions of the city's comprehensive plan, promoting increased housing options and innovation that will help meet the needs the many sectors of the community, including smaller households, students, millennials, baby boomers, people with disabilities, and low-income families, make more efficient use of public infrastructure and services, and are within walking distance to shops, jobs, and amenities, and to encourage well-designed infill development and improve the economic and social well-being of the community. And I think I just like the way that they have put that together to really show why this legislation is in place and who they're hoping to address, which is everyone. So these are the basic local regulations. After the local regulations, I'm going to pop into, I've separated the attached regulations from the detached regulations, just so we can get a better picture of what that looks like separately. So Bellingham requires owner occupancy. So the owner needs to occupy either the ADU or the primary dwelling unit, either one of those. And the owner must file a covenant confirming the occupancy. This covenant will run with the property. So when you sell the property, that covenant will go on to the next owner. And each owner needs to file that they every 2 years that they are indeed living on the property. So if you purchase a property with a legal permitted ADU, it is up to you to register that you are the owner of that property within 30 days of closing. There are to be no more than 4 occupants of an ADU, and as we'll look at later, an ADU can only have a maximum of 2 bedrooms. So just as far as space goes, no more than 4 occupants, regardless of relationship in the ADU. And then 1 ADU per lot. So that could be an ADU that's attached and an ADU that's within the property, or a detached ADU. So there's only 1 allowed on the lot. You can't have a detached and 1 with it. And then this goes into kind of the health and safety regulations, but the ceiling heights in rooms and halls must be 7 feet or greater. So if that's something that you'll need to consider and look into as you begin to develop your project. Oops, too far. All right. So I'm going to move into the regulations for an attached dwelling unit. So an attached unit, and as well as a detached, but the measurements are that, sorry, my puppy just walked in. He wants to say hello to everyone. All right, so size. Everybody wants to know about the size of an ADU and how big. So here the regulations are that it cannot exceed 66% of the area of the primary dwelling unit, or 800 feet. So whichever is smaller is the biggest that it can be. If you have a property that you're looking at building an attached dwelling unit within the house, the director will work with you to best take advantage of the space that's allowed. Granted that the actual ADU itself cannot exceed 800 square feet. But let's say you have 750 feet to work with, but your house is 1,000 square feet, which would kind of put your top range at 660 square feet. You can work with the director to see if you can squeeze more space and expand into that extra 90 square feet to best just make use of that floor. Again, no more than 2 bedrooms. Every accessory dwelling unit needs to have at minimum a 9-foot by 18-foot parking stall, and that's on top of the parking that's already required for the primary dwelling unit. And then just from a design perspective, the entry should just be subordinate to the primary dwelling unit. So you should know, anybody who's visiting the secondary unit, the accessory dwelling unit, should know where to go so that they're not walking into the other unit. As far as utilities go, they can have systems. The systems can be shared dependent on whether or not the primary dwelling the system can handle the extra utility for the extra utilities requirements for the second unit. So as long as that is in place, you can just add on, you can share that. If it is that the primary dwellings systems cannot take on that, the extra from that second dwelling unit, then that will need to be put in place up to code as it exists now in the city of Bellingham. Oh, and just one piece, with all of the access to utilities, so let's say the water shut off, the gas shut off, and the electrical shut off, all residents of each unit need to have access, equal and unrestricted access. So no one should have to walk through another unit in order to get access to the electrical panel or the water shut off or the gas shut off. Just for the sake of time, I wanted to put this in the slide as far as attached ADUs as a short-term rental, to say that it is allowed. At this time, Bellingham is allowing attached ADUs as short-term to be permitted as short-term rentals. There are definitely regulations that you'll have to abide by, but it is allowed, and you can find more about that in the chapter that I have linked here in the slides. The slides will also be available at on the website or on Facebook Live after this is done. All right, so moving on to detached ADUs. So in order for a detached ADU to be permitted on a lot, the lot must be equal and or greater to 5,000 square feet, 500 square feet. Be abutting an alley and have access to an alley, or have access to more than one public street. So that could be a corner, or just because I'm in the letter streets and those make sense to me, a through lot. So if somebody had their frontage on G Street and then the back of the lot was on H Street, and that lot went all the way through, that would be another example of a property with that had access to 2 streets where you could build a detached ADU. Same size restrictions for attached ADUs are required for a detached ADU, with the caveat here being that the 66% of the floor area as well, or the 800 feet, does include ancillary space here. So in the attached ADU, it doesn't include the garage, but in a detached unit, then the 800 square feet or the 66% of the floor area of the primary dwelling does include the garage, a workshop, a shed, anything like that. And when you're thinking about detached ADUs and the floor space, you're using the sum of the gross horizontal area of the floor from the exterior faces of the wall. So that, just know that that will be counted in to the calculations, and that's something that your designer and builder can help walk you through and what that means to greater detail. For fire and safety, one of the regulations for detached ADUs is that there must be greater than 6 feet between the detached ADU and the primary dwelling unit. Whatcom County requires 10 feet. Other jurisdictions might be a little bit different, but something to consider, especially as you're talking and calculating the setbacks from the setbacks. And in design, how close the ADU is going to be to the primary dwelling unit. Excuse me. So we'll get into yard requirements here. And these are going to differ a little bit via depending on the municipality as well. But as far as Bellingham goes, the front yard requirement is 50 feet from the center line of the street, 60 if it's an arterial, and the side yard 40 feet from a center line of the street to 50 feet of an arterial. And I have these in picture form right after this, so you'll get a better understanding of what that means. And the rear setback and the side setback, so that is how far the unit would need to be from the rear, the back of the lot, and the side of the lot. And something else to take into consideration as you are doing your due diligence and digging into your property and the nuances of your property and how you're going to, where you're going to place a detached ADU, is looking into the easements on the property. So easements are most commonly a utility. So if you are upslope from your neighbor, chances are your sewer line runs down the slope through your property and then down through their property before it connects to the main city line. So that would be an example of an easement. And again, I've seen this with the electrical, and I've also seen it with sewer. So those are things that to be keeping in mind as you're digging into your property and the restraints that might exist on your property when it comes to how you're going to design your unit and where you're going to put it on your property. The height. So in Bellingham, the height of the detached ADU may not exceed 20 feet. So how Bellingham is looking at that is they are looking at from the lowest grade at the wall to either the height of the flat roof or the average of the gabled roof. So hopefully this graphic gives you a sense of how that will be measured. So with the bottom being the lowest, again, the lowest grade. So if you're on a hill, that needs to be considered in where the lowest grade will be, and then how that will look next to a with a gabled roof, and how with a flat roof, just give you a sense of how high that might be. The height might vary in other jurisdictions, so that's going to be something to look into as you dig into your property. The goal that Bellingham has as far as design is to maintain architectural similarity from the primary unit to the detached ADU, so that they go together and kind of maintain those characteristics throughout. So big pieces of that are the similar roof pitch, the siding, the kinds of windows, and you can really, take it to the little details and making it just a mini-me of your primary dwelling unit. That will just kind of depend on where you want your costs to go when you're designing. And then utilities. So this is similar to the attached ADU, but the biggest piece is that if the primary dwelling unit's current systems cannot take the addition of the extra water or voltage or volume that the extra dwelling unit will produce and bring, that will need to be upgraded to current Bellingham City Code. So, and then if you're looking at shutoffs to all of these systems, the shutoffs need to be accessible equally and unrestricted to all residents of the property. So here's just some graphics to give you just a picture. I'm a picture person, so I put these together just to give a better understanding of what it might look like to put an ADU in the regulations that are in place in the city of Bellingham. So this is a corner lot, which is really the easiest to kind of picture, depending on what your property looks like and the site constraints that might exist. But here we're seeing that the front and side yard. So the side yard here, so this will be the secondary road since the primary dwelling unit faces this street. So this side yard, this side will be the side yard, which requires a 40-foot setback from the center line of the street, while the main house requires a 50-foot setback because this is a front yard. The side and rear setbacks, so those still exist at 5 feet in the city of Bellingham, and that is measured from the property line to the foundation of the property, of the structure, excuse me, the foundation of the structure being built. And here we see the 6-foot separation that, or the greater than 6-foot separation that needs to be honored in those regulations. So something that you're not seeing in here is the parking. So that's going to be very, very site specific and design specific. And because this is a really general picture of the regulations, I left the parking off because that is going to really be determined by so many factors on your property: setbacks, easements, where you want to place your ADU. But there must be one extra parking spot here for your ADU. And something to note about parking is not allowed in the side or rear setbacks, so or the front setback. So parking could not happen here. Parking cannot happen here. So these are just little details to consider when you're looking at parking. Parking, as far as with an alley, is a lot easier to picture and really bring into the site. So alleys definitely have their advantages when you're developing on an alley. It removes, if your alley is on the rear of the property, it removes the rear setback. So you can build the property right up to the back of the property line. There's no setback required there. And here I have the 5-foot side setback, again, to the foundation of the property. And then this is showing the height. So like I said, from the lowest grade, which here is just equal to the foundation of the property, to the average gable height of the new ADU. And then an interior lot. So it must be at least 5,000 square feet. So I have kind of crunched this into a 5,000 square foot lot just to give you an idea of how things might be arranged and what you're working with as far as setbacks, space, and those measurements. All right. And then again, I wanted to touch on the detached ADUs as a short-term rental. Again, that is allowed. The city of Bellingham is allowing detached ADUs as they are allowing permitted short-term rentals in commercial, residential, multi, and urban village locations. So if you have a detached ADU in a residential single zone location, if that's the zoning that your property is in, then they will not permit your detached ADU as a short-term rental. So there's lots of more information about that in this chapter here, but I wanted to cover that just because for some people, that is why they are developing a detached ADU or an ADU in general, is for that short-term rental income. So just a general step-by-step, this is not by no means comprehensive. There are going to be so many different bits and pieces of this when it comes to your property. The very first stop to make when you are looking at building an ADU on your property is doing your due diligence for your specific property. So visiting your permitting office to determine what the regulations are, what your zoning is, and how your property fits into those regulations. I think it's really important also to get a survey of the lot lines. If we're talking about Bellingham specific, the city IQ is not always 100% correct. So it's really important to get a survey of your property to have a really good understanding of where your lot lines are and if they're correct, and how that might affect your square footage if you're an interior lot, and how you relate your detached ADU, if that's your choice, in relation to your neighbors. Next stop, once you've done your due diligence and you have a really good idea of what's going to be allowed on your property, is to head over to Dylan at Umpqua Bank and check out lending and check out what you might be qualified for, and what kind of products are available, so that you can get an idea of what your budget is. And once you have a really good idea of what your budget is, you'll make a stop you'll get in contact with Maggie and go over what design features you're looking for and how you can make your ADU fit into your budget. And then you'll complete that process and head into build. And just keeping in mind that these processes are going to overlap throughout the lifespan of the project. So this is a general step-by-step, however, things will fluctuate. All right. And before, I just want to go over kind of costs to consider before I hand this over to Dylan. So first is going to be permits. I have a link, or I have a breakdown of permit costs in a future slide, but just as a general sense, to consider costs of permits, the design, materials, the site preparation, labor and trades, and others. So this is just the tip of the iceberg of costs as well, but a really big picture of all of the pieces that go into building and developing an ADU. All right, Dylan, I'm gonna hand this over to you.
Perfect. Yeah, the fun part. So
the fun part.
yeah, so I think, everyone listening to this and or, will listen to this, is remotely interested in ADUs. Patrick and Maggie get to do the fun part with the design and the build. But, before that happens, you do need the money to finance the ADU. So that's where we at Umpqua Bank come in play. And I think you gave me a control, Kelcy, so let me test that. One more time. There we go. And I also have a 10-week puppy down here, so he's getting really good at the video chats. He's sleeping right now, but if you hear some yapping or whining, it's him. I didn't step on him, I promise. So yeah, there's three main options to finance an ADU. We have our home style renovation loan, which is really specifically tailored for renovations, which also encapsulates building ADUs. The home equity line of credit, which actually I don't originate. I do have a great contact at our bank. It's on the retail side, but that's a great option for financing an ADU, and then a cash out refinance. And so that would be the third option. And I know we're going to do questions at the end and just kind of bomb through it. So I will wait until the end if there are any questions on financing. So the home style renovation. So this is the first one I want to go over. It's most specifically tailored to building an ADU. It's a 9-month renovation term. Interest only payments on, the money that you're drawing for that renovation. Loan to value restrictions here. So loan to value, the easiest way to put it is if your home's worth $100,000 and our loan to value requirement is 95, that means that we can lend up to $95,000, right? 95% of the value of the home. So loan to value requirements on a 1-unit primary residence, 97% if one borrower is a first-time home buyer. It's 95 if, it's an existing home. Let's say you own the home, you want to, do a refinance into this home style renovation loan, because we can do these as a purchase or a refinance. So it's 95% loan to value. If you're refinancing, we can do 97 if one borrower is a first-time home buyer, which means they have not been on the title of a home in the last 3 years. We can do it to 90% loan to value on a 1-unit second home and 85% on a 1-unit investment property. So you'll see we cannot do it on multi-unit primary residences, multi-unit second home, or multi-unit investment properties, okay? And property type, property type, we can do 1 to 4 unit primary, but we can't do multi-units on the investment properties or the second homes. And I'll dive into some of the other products where we can on that. So cost of the renovation is limited to 75% of the as completed value. So, the appraiser will essentially appraise the home as is, and then also capture the value after the ADU is built. The ADU cost is limited to 75% of the as completed value. So usually we don't have any issues with that. We do require a contingency reserve of 10% of the renovation cost. So that is not on the acquisition cost, that's just on the cost of building the ADU, 10% of that. Permits and plans are required before closing, and closing fees are roughly about $5,000. Obviously it's gonna depend on the loan size, product, all that. And then closing time frame is about 45 days. Once again, depends on the project, depends on the builder. If you're using Patrick, we're doing it in 10 days, right? So yeah, that's the home style renovation loan. The biggest benefits I would say is the high loan to value. So you'll see on the other products that I'm going to explain, we don't have as high of an appetite for loan to value on those products. With the home style renovation loan, if you're living in the home, which as we talked about with an ADU, you need to live in the home, we can go to 95% loan to value, potentially 97. And then also you're capturing the equity of the ADU in that appraised value. The other products I'm going to explain, we don't actually capture that value. We're just appraising it as is and giving you cash for that. So that's another advantage. Some cons on the home style renovation is it's very labor intensive, paperwork wise. There is a big construction packet you need to fill out, working hand in hand with Patrick and Maggie and getting that all filled out. So it is pretty labor intensive on the homeowner, and then pretty limited flexibility with some of the, what you can and can't do. And, we do monthly inspections, things like that. So let me go to the next option here. So the next option is a cash out refinance. So the loan to value requirements on a cash out refinance on a 1-unit primary residence is 80% loan to value. So once again, your home's worth $100,000, we can go up to $80,000. So if you owe $50,000 on your home, we can give you a new loan of $80,000, give you $30,000 cash in your pocket, okay? 2 to 4 unit primaries, we can go to 75% loan to value. 1-unit second homes, we can go to 75% loan to value. 1-unit investment properties is 75, 2 to 4 unit investment properties is 70% loan to value. So you can see there's a lot bigger of an array of property types available on the cash out refinance. The closing fees are about $3,000, so a little bit less than the rehab loan. The closing time frame is about 30 to 45 days. The biggest benefits on a cash out refinance is the flexibility with the cash, right? Once we close the refinance, we're handing you the $30,000 and you're running with it and you can do whatever you want with it. Once we close, the bank's out of the picture, okay? And the other benefit is we're able to do, multi-unit primary, single unit secondary, and then multi-unit investment properties as well. So an array of product or property types there. And then some cons, or I guess really the only con with the cash out refinance is, we do have some limiting loan to values compared to the renovation loan. We top out at 80% loan to value. So if you don't quite have that equity there, it might not be the best option. Also, we are giving you that lump of cash immediately at closing. So you are immediately paying interest on that money. So if you do the cash out refinance, and I think we'll get into kind of timelines a little bit later, if I give you that $30,000 or that $100,000, you're paying interest on that money immediately, right? The renovation loan, you're making draws, and then the HELOC, which I'll get to next, you're making draws as well on that, and only paying interest on the amount you draw. So those are the pros and cons on the cash out refinance. And then the third option here is a home equity line of credit, also kind of coined HELOC is the acronym. So the loan to value on those, we can only do them on 1 unit primary residences, and they cap at 80% loan to value. So once again, if your home's worth $100,000, we can go to $80,000 on that loan amount. Okay. They are interest only payments for the first 10 years, and the payments are amortized over 30 years. So that means that payment is really small because it's amortized over 30 years, and you can do interest only payments for the first 10 years, which is great. Rates are based on prime. I need to update my slides because I did this for Housing Week when prime was 5%. The prime rate's actually 4.25 now. So HELOCs are based on the current prime rate of 4.25. So assuming best credit, 80% loan to value, all that good stuff, you're going to be looking at about 4.25. Okay. The closing fees we only have a $75 annual fee on our HELOCs. There's no origination or appraisal fee. So huge advantage of the HELOCs is very minimal upfront closing fees, and you only have the $75 annual fee. And then the closing time frame is about 30 days. So benefits, once again, like the cash out refinance, you don't pay interest on that money until you draw it out. I best compare a HELOC to a credit card on your home's equity, right? You're not paying on it unless you use it, okay? And then also the low fees, right? $75 annual fee is pretty minimal compared to the $3,000 to $5,000 on the other products. The cons, obviously limited loan to value, 80% loan to value, and then property types. We can only do it on primary residences. So those are the benefits and the cons on the 3 options. And that's my info, which I'm sure Kelcy will make available as well. And yeah, that is my section. Cool. Thanks, Kelcy.
You're muted, Kelcy.
Okay, I found it. Thank you. Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, Maggie, I'm going to switch over the control to you and let you take over.
Okay. Did this go forward one? Let's see.
Oop, there we go.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, where to start? So permitting, we want to talk about the permitting process, which actually comes at the end of the design process, but the research that's required so that you don't have any surprises when you get to the end is that due diligence that you were talking about earlier at the beginning. And I love it when homeowners come to us and they've already done all that research. Doesn't mean we're not going to do it. We're still going to do it, which is a double check for your project. It's something that we have to do just, we like to take ownership of what we do. And so one of the things that we discover in that process of talking to permitting officials is that the code is subject to a little bit of interpretation sometimes. And it's a really good idea, to have a couple goes at it with them and see, what did we miss in that first time that we went through and asked all these questions about our property? What limitation did we miss? And sometimes that's discovered later in the process. We don't always turn over every single stone to begin with, although we sure try to. So the costs, I can't actually see the land use cost permit you have over here on the side of 531 to, I can't see that side of the slide, unfortunately.
I can see it, Maggie. Do you want me to read it to you? So it's 531 plus a $53 notice fee.
Okay, and then okay, so basically we're talking about the different parts of the permitting fees that you're going to have to go through, which include the land use, the park impact fee, the transportation, and the construction fees, which are building, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, etc., which oftentimes is rolled into one it's called a combination permit. So permitting, okay, I'm just gonna put the details on the slide aside, and I just want to talk about my experience with permitting for ADUs. And it's a multi-step process. The first thing that you're going to be required to do and I'll just talk about my experiences in the city of Bellingham. The first thing you're going to be required to do is to get your land use permit. And that's the ADU permit. It's not a building permit, but it's similar in the sense that they want to know what you're going to build. They want to know generally what you're going to build. So you have to have a sketch, you have to have sort of a, you have to have an idea, you have to know how big it's going to be, and you don't have to have all the details worked out. You don't have to know exactly where the plumbing fixtures are going to go inside the structure, but you have to have a shell figured out. And so you take that idea to them in the form of an application with drawings that include your site plan, and how your parking is all going to work. There's certain boxes you have to check on that, and then it goes into a review process. And it's in order to complete that review process, you have to mail letters to all of your neighbors saying, hey, I'm going to change the land use of this lot in your neighborhood. Do you have a problem with that? And your neighbors are invited to come to a public meeting at the city of Bellingham and talk about your lot. So far, I've never had anyone do that. I mean, I've had people get permits. We have to post it on the lot, a sign saying there's a public meeting about this land use on this property. But so far, we've never had anybody really object to someone changing the use of their property. So that part is really intense. It takes about 3 months, honestly, to get that land use done. And then you're going to move into your building permit phase, which can be a lot faster if you've got a good design and you've got it all pre-engineered and everything. You might be able to roll right into your building permit phase, which can turn around in 1 month in the permit office. Let's see, what else did I want to say about that? There's a one piece in there that is going to be in between your land use permit and your building permit. And that is this new, it's not really new, it's just become way more prevalent lately. It is a natural resource assessment of your property. And we're seeing that happening inside Bellingham city limits and out in the county. And that's where they look at everything on your site. They look at whether you have steep slopes. They look at, do you have curb cut? How is the traffic for pulling cars in and out? They look at everything about your lot. And if there's anything that's a critical area, anything that's, needs special attention, it'll happen in that phase. And usually that needs to be completed before you can actually go for your building permit. So that there's the 3-month land use, and then there's this little in-between permit, which can be pretty quick, and it can be also a couple months. And then there's the 1-month building permit. So I think I can move on from the permitting slide. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. There we go. Whoa. Okay. And we must submit a permit request to permitting department, as well as all, can't read it, within, oh yes, there's actually a system where you can go into CDIQ, and you can draw a circle around your property, and it'll give you all the addresses, names and addresses for all the properties within like 500-foot radius. That's who you have to mail all the letters out to. So, so then this is the fun part. And this is a part we haven't really talked a whole lot about the goals of the dwelling, which is kind of special to me because I've heard so many different reasons for having an ADU. And sometimes it's like return on investment, like I want to turn this into a rental property. But honestly, that's more rare than what we've come across. And what we've come across is people wanting to have an accessory dwelling unit for a relative that they want to move onto their property, an elder, or maybe somebody, someone else younger. They want to downsize, so they want their house to go to their kids, and they want to move into a smaller unit because maybe there's just one of them now. Another thing that we've heard is that people need caregivers, and they want their caregiver to have a place to live that is nice because they want them to be comfortable, so their caregiver will stay with them maybe for many years. So it's really important to think about that. We can really get caught up in like the details, the density of the permitting process and figuring all this out and how do we get the money. But really that goal of what the dwelling is it often is a huge driver in people being willing to go through the work to do what it takes to create an ADU. And so I guess the site considerations I was talking about earlier, that Department of Natural Resource assessment of your property, it helps you figure out whether you can, it helps you define the limitations on your property. Basically, if you can meet the parking, you can meet all the requirements that Kelcy was talking about earlier as far as square footages, that's going to cover your site considerations. And then I guess another thing to consider when you're building an accessory dwelling unit is what kind of building do you want to bring into our culture? Do you want to bring in a builder basic thing, or do you want to bring in a high performance building, something that's super energy efficient? Do you want to think in terms of, is this little unit in my backyard going to be self-sufficient? Can I orient it to put solar panels on top of it? Do I want it to be very self-sufficient and have a high performance heating system? So there's a lot to consider. Let's see.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. I don't want to interrupt. I think that you really just did an amazing segue to Patrick.
Yeah.
Patrick, you really, so like the building features of how, to move into this, the high efficiency world and what we can do with the container of an ADU. So I do want to let you know, listeners, that I am seeing all of your questions, and for those who added late, I just want to let you know that we're going to finish up with everybody's presentation, and then at the end we're going to just go through the list of questions, and whoever has the answer for that, we're going to get to you. So just hold tight and keep asking questions. So Patrick, I am going to go ahead and give you control of the screen and present away.
Thanks. Thanks, Maggie. And Maggie, feel free to chime in on some of this stuff too. In terms of our day-to-day world, I'm less of a designer than I used to be. And Maggie really oversees more of that effort, but I have done a lot of design. And in talking to people, so all of our clients start with conversations with me. So part of my job is to try to figure out what it is they're trying to get at and what kind of values are important to them when it comes to, their existing home or maybe a new structure or reconfiguration. And that helps us identify if we're a good member of their team. Because some of these values about designing and building sustainably are things that drive our work and our craft and the reason we want to go to work every day and why it's meaningful to us. And so some of those things are what Maggie touched on, which is what is the quality of these buildings and how can we build them in such a way that they're super comfortable, really easy to take care of, last a long time, have as little draw on what may become and are becoming limited resources in our community and globally too, in terms of how much energy do they use to have a comfortable, safe place to live in. And another piece of that that's really important that has to do with the way the building's built is how healthy is it to live in that building? How is it built? How do we manage the air? And how do we manage the products that go into that building that don't bring in elements that cause us to feel sick? And there's a lot of really common building components and mechanical aspects to existing buildings that are problematic from an indoor air quality and just sort of health issues. And these are especially important for little humans and old humans. The people in between tend to be a little bit more resilient, but they really start to show problems as people get older and when people are really small. So indoor air quality is really critical, and that has to do with the quality of the building. And that transitions into, obviously, what are the pieces that we're using to build the building. So one of the things that I really like about ADUs and small buildings, tiny houses and other micro houses, is that we have an opportunity to focus our financial resources on a smaller footprint. And my own experience and opinion here is that if we have a limited set of resources, which all of our clients come to us with a limited set of resources, the very first conversation we have is, what do you want to do and how much money do you have? We have to iron out those two things before we can go further, before we can be of any service to anyone. So then our job, and really Maggie's team's job, especially right at the beginning, is to guide the client in such a way that they're maximizing their resources to meet their goals. And so we're pretty good at and have a lot of experience in reconfiguring existing spaces, which fits the ADU well. If you have a large enough house where you can sort of turn a corner of that house or an end of that house into a separate living area, we're pretty good at that. And we're pretty good at designing small structures. So in my mind, we're giving up, in some ways, we're giving up volume and space for really good design, thoughtful, well-crafted design, and really good materials, especially starting on the envelope of the building, because the envelope of the building determines everything else. It determines how healthy it is. It determines how efficient it is, how easy it is to heat and cool. And the materials that are used for that envelope have everything to do with what can be excessive lifetime costs on managing this building. This is particularly important as people are getting into buying new homes and they have no idea what they're getting into in terms of just taking care of a building. And that can be a huge amount of money over the lifetime of ownership. And the other thing that we find a lot is for older folks that are trying to downsize, they generally are not interested in doing maintenance as they get older. It's not safe, and they may not want to spend their time doing that, and they may have limited finances. So having a building that's built really well, that's going to last a long time, is going to ease the load for all of those areas. So all of these things in terms of the left side, in terms of envelope, passive solar, solar panels, high efficiency appliances, use of space, quality of materials, those are all critical. And every time we talk to someone, the first time that I go out, I'm looking at their house. What is the exposure and what are the opportunities that they can capitalize on in terms of offsetting some of their energy use cost by accessing renewable energy. So we would like to build every building in such a way that it was already ready to use renewable energy resources, even if that's not available immediately in that budget. That building should still be made in such a way that it can transition very quickly into the use of that, whether that's wind or solar or other ways of generating electricity, which is the direction we're going into now. So some sites in Bellingham, you may, like in the lettered streets or Birchwood where we're at, you might have these long sites and they're heavily treed, and you can tuck a little building in there, but it can be challenging sometimes to orient them in such a way that you can maximize sun. Other areas are really available, and sometimes you can share it between an ADU and a house. It really is totally dependent on that site and what the client's budget is and what value they place on the things that I'm talking about now, which are really important things to us. And so we're going to be a builder that is most helpful with someone whose values are aligned with ours. So in small buildings, again, I think, in my own opinion, are better able to access some of these high performance aspects because it's just a smaller thing that we're putting together. It takes less materials and it's just easy. And as a builder, it's just easier to build. It's easier to build an 800 square foot building than a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot building. The resources on every level are minimized. So do I have another slide here, Kelcy? I'm going to let Maggie actually speak to these ones if you don't mind.
Sure.
Maggie, thanks.
I'm happy to. We run into.
Sorry, Maggie, I don't want to completely.
Yeah.
I just because it's at 7:45 and I want to leave some time for questions.
Okay.
I'm going to be posting these slides so we can and this information is readily available.
Yep.
So I'm just going to go ahead and skip this. I'm going to take back the control here, and I'm going to let's go to the considerations of time just real quick. Maybe take like 2 minutes to go over this with your experience of initial contact to the start of construction, and how long someone should really plan for, because that kind of speaks to why we're starting these presentations now. And then we can also, let's skip modular. We can, if somebody wants to know about modular ADUs, go ahead and get in touch with Patrick or myself. I have some ideas about modular ADUs, and I know that Patrick has some ideas for that as well. And then let's just go ahead and move on. After we talk about time, let's move on to questions because we have quite a few, and I want to be able to get those addressed.
Sure, I can talk about the time. So this is going to be this is essentially our timeline. We tell most clients to plan you need to start this process about a year before you want to do construction. And for us, that's based on our process, how many people we have on a waiting list and how long it takes us to move people through that process. I'm going to say that's pretty common with our colleagues who are also general contractors and that are doing good work right now. I think you're going to find in this community, anybody that's doing good work has a long lead time and plan on at least a year for a major project and sometimes longer.
Oh, great. Thank you. modular. And I kind of touched on this in the beginning, and why, you know, I'm approaching ADUs right now, and why we're working on ADUs right now, and why we're promoting ADUs right now in a time that it maybe doesn't feel like it aligns financially. So if anybody wants to go through that and ask us any questions about that, please feel free. Call to action. And then here, I'm just going to stop here on our contact information because I know that somebody asked for our contact information. And then I'm going to move over. I'm just going to start addressing people's questions here, starting with Stacy. You asked, your question is, and this is to, let's see, either probably Maggie. What is your experience with the City of Bellingham approving a deviation to the parking standards for an ADU and the primary residence? Oh, you're on mute, Maggie.
Thanks.
Yep.
They are pretty strict on that inside the city limits of Bellingham, because they don't want a bunch of cars out in the setback areas. You know what you're talking about is you're talking about there's a term for it that's on the tip of my tongue. There's a whole nother process that you go through if you want to deviate variance. Thank you. If you want to deviate from what's in the city charter, which is what determines this process, then you can ask for a variance, and it costs about $1,000 for that fee, a variance fee, and then it will add 3 months to your process. It's a very long process, and it's also one where you have to invite neighbors in to talk about what you want to do that's out of the ordinary. So you can get parking accommodated that way through a variance, but we've not had much luck with variances lately. It used to be something that was done fairly often, but variances are not. The last few years, I haven't seen many variances actually get anywhere.
Thank you, Maggie. Todd, I hope that addresses your question. But just to fully address, the parking spot does need to be on the property, and it cannot be within the front or the side yard setback. And if you have more questions about that, I can follow up with you afterwards. So just let me know. Magdalene, this is for you, Dylan. Magdalene asks, can you pay the HELOC early?
So yeah, I think what they're asking, is there any prepayment penalty? So you can pay off the HELOC early and keep it open. I want to say, once again, this is the one product that I do not originate myself, which I know it's kind of the most attractive product to do this sort of thing, right? It's almost like I'm selling it better than the other ones. But I believe for as long as there's no prepayment penalty to pay it off, but if you close it, I want to say it's 2 or 3 years that you have to keep it open, or we will want to recoup the closing costs that we do incur, because there are closing costs, right? To get the appraisal, there's some title and escrow fees for recording. We eat those fees, but if they close it, it's either 2 or 3 years. If they close it within that 2 or 3 years, then there's a early closure fee, and I want to say it's a few $100.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Stacy, you asked then, oh, hold on. Let me see. Never mind. I'm going to go back up. Okay, Stacy. And this is to Maggie or Patrick. How long is a land use permit valid if approved?
I believe it's 2 years. I think that is a 2-year permit. So you get your land use, your land use changed through that permit, and you have 2 years to use it. And that means basically you got to go get your building permit.
Stacy, I'm going to ask for a little bit clarification here. You're asking if a hearing is required. What are you referring to as far as for what regulation? If you can, if you're still
Would
with
need
us.
you know, there's a hearing required for a variance. Is that what, because I think I said that earlier.
You did. Yeah, it doesn't clarify. So Stacy's question is a hearing required? The information sheet does not mention a hearing. It does require public notice, but it seems to be an administrative decision. And I'm wondering if you're referring to the land use permit. Oop.
I think that it is in both cases a variance and land use permit. Anytime where they tell you that you've got to mail out, you have to do that 500-foot radius, and you have to mail out notice to all your neighbors, and you have to post a sign in your yard. What's that? What the sign has on it is that there's a public meeting, and this issue is going to be addressed.
Okay.
Whether it's a variance or whether it's a land use. And then that's where people are invited to just, they can submit comments to the city. I mean, I'm not reading the reg about it right now. I'm going from memory of what I've done. And, you know, once you post that sign, people can read it. There's some contact information on there. There's usually a date. And that's usually when the final, the city is going to have a meeting about it and make a determination. So your comments would be considered before it happens.
Okay.
Or you can attend that. It's usually a public meeting.
Okay. So she said she did clarify that it's referring to the land use permit, and you addressed that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anytime you have to do that 500-foot diameter and mail out.
Okay. Todd, you asked, can an ADU be designed for multiple purposes? For instance, can it be part workshop, part dwelling space, or does the entire space need to serve as a dwelling?
So you're directing that to me.
I can kind of answer from my perspective, but go ahead and answer from your perspective.
It can be. You can have an office in it if you want to. You can have an art studio in there if you want to. It's just how much space, you know, the overall, if you're going to include that in your accessory dwelling unit, if it's like, I want to create an art studio living space, and that's what I'm going to be renting or putting on Airbnb or giving to my granny, then yes, you have to include it in your maximum square footage. But I was wondering about this, and I actually would have to talk to someone at the city, but I thought, well, I know you can you can have a living space that's separate from your house that's not an accessory dwelling unit. Like you can have a bedroom for a teenager out back if you want to in your backyard. And it's not considered an accessory dwelling unit in this sense. It doesn't require a change in land use. So now, can you have a bedroom here and an accessory dwelling unit in this building? Like, I don't know. I mean, that would be going down a road so could I have an art studio in this building, you know, this room, and then this be the accessory dwelling unit over here under this square footage? I don't know. I think you'd have to have separation. Mm-hmm. That's where it would come down.
My understanding of that would be like, if you're going to do one unit, those two things could coexist, but both of those things would need to be within that 800 square feet or 66% of your, of the total size of the primary dwelling unit.
Yeah, that sounds probably what I would find out if I went researching that. Yeah, but I would double check it.
Todd, can you give us a ballpark cost from ADUs you've seen added to Bellingham recently? Patrick, I'm going to refer to you because you answered that question for me the other day.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I tell most people start at $200,000, plan on $300 a square foot. It really depends on, you know, maybe you can do it for $100,000 if you're, you know, adding on to your house, or you're reconfiguring your house and you're not having to do all the groundwork and all the other stuff, whether it's attached or detached. But in general, I would start with those two things. If you want to do like a carriage house, like a, you know, 600 feet above a garage, 400 feet above a garage, or you want to do a little cottage out back or a little tiny house, you know, anything in that sort of sub 1,000 square feet, whether it's an addition, reconfiguration of existing space, or adding something, it's all going to be somewhere between $150,000 and $300,000, in my opinion.
Thank you.
When you're thinking about this, if you have to break ground and go all the way up to a roof to create this, that's going to be way more expensive than if you already have a building out back and you simply have to run plumbing to it and then put some partition walls up inside. Like, there's a big difference in cost there.
Yeah.
Between, like, I don't have a building at all and I have a building I want to convert. It's, I mean, not a big difference, but there's a difference for sure. If you don't have to excavate and you don't have to put a roof on it, it's already there. Right, Patrick?
Even better, you know, a home that was designed for, you know, 4 or 5 people, and now it's changing use, and it's possible to, say, convert a 2-car garage into a living space. We have a project now that is a single car garage bay out of a 3-car garage bay that's being converted into an ADU for the mother of a family that moved in there. So all of that, the shell is essentially done. And so all we're doing is bringing mechanicals in there and then configuring that space to be, you know, it's a very small space, so it's pretty thoughtful that way. And, you know, I would, you know, that project's very close to $200,000.
Is that in Bellingham?
Yeah.
Bellingham. Okay.
Actually, I think it's in the end.
Yeah, it's in the urban growth area.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's in no man's land.
Thank you. Todd also asked, how can you figure out if your property is in a residential multi-zoned location? I always use Bellingham City IQ. Do you guys have another way?
If you're inside the city limits of Bellingham, yes, you go to City IQ, and then when you go in there, you can spend hours in there studying your property once you learn how to use their tools. But there's also a way to get to the assessor's site that way. But if you can't find your way to the assessor's site there, you can go over to the Whatcom County assessor and look your property up that way. You can find out a lot of information about your property there too.
All right, well, that was the end of the questions. We are right on time. So I just want to say thank you to my co-hosts, Maggie, Patrick, and Dylan. And I want to thank all of you who tuned in. Really appreciate you showing up for us tonight and asking us questions. And I look forward to doing this again. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And if you have further questions, I hope that you guys took down our information here, or you can ask here on the Facebook page. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.
Kelcy, you know a lot about ADUs.
I've been digging in deep. All right, hold on. I want to figure out here. We're going to stop the live stream. Stacy said, thank you all for this great presentation. Thank you, Stacy. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Well done.
Thanks for dealing with my like nervous jitter inability to like speak.
Oh, you did great.
Patrick, I appreciate looking down and seeing you giggle. That helped me.
Well done.
Thanks so much. Well, that's going to be posted on the Facebook. So please feel free to share that to your pages. And if you if you can't access that, let me know and I can somehow get it to you.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelcy.
Cool. Thank you guys so much. Have a great night.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.